Hi everyone, welcome to the first lesson of the writing course. This is task 1, lesson number 1. It's been long overdue. I was supposed to record this lesson a few days ago, but because I had my hands full with my own prep, I couldn't really get to it. So without further ado, let's begin. And please guys, make sure to grab a piece of paper and a pen or pencil to take notes, because this lesson promises to be very dense. So you need to be taking notes throughout the lesson. So let's start. Okay, understanding band descriptors. This is very important if you want to score high on task 1 and task 2. You need to understand the requirements, the criteria through which your report is evaluated. So we'll look at band 5 problems, band 6 problems, and then band 7 positives. The content of the lesson will be the following. So we'll talk about criteria mainly here. First, we'll look at task achievement. As you probably know, there are 4 criteria in task 1 and task 2. Task achievements, it's for task 1, and task response, it's for task 2. Cohesion and coherence, it's the same for both tasks, and lexical resource and grammatical range. So we'll look at task achievement first. We'll look at band 5 task achievement, band 6 task achievement, and then band 7 positives and task achievement. We'll do the same with each and every criterion. So I'm just letting you know beforehand. So yeah, firstly, let's talk about what keeps you stuck at band 5 task achievement. So if we look at criteria, here it says the response generally addresses the requirements of the task. What this means is, if we look at the requirements, if you are taking your exam, or if you have taken your exam, and if you're taking academic, of course, which I hope you are, you'll be given requirements on a piece of paper along with your task. And your requirements are, you need to write at least 150 words and summarize information, right, by selecting and reporting key features, and you need to make comparisons where relevant. So the problem with task 1, band 5 task achievement is that many candidates, they either fall short of the word count, right? They might write less than 150 words, or they might fail to summarize information by selecting and reporting key features. So whatever your problem is, unless you fully satisfy the requirements of the task, you're not getting anything higher than a band 5 for task achievement. So please make sure you write at least 150 words and summarize information, which we'll talk about in the next slides. So the problem with band 5 is that their response generally addresses the requirements of the task. It doesn't fully address the requirements of the task. And other problems, the recounting of detail is mainly mechanical, which means it's repetitive, right? They follow a certain pattern. And there may be no data to support description. We'll talk about it in the next slide. And formats, we should talk about the formats, because the formats at band 5 may be inappropriate in some places. So what I've seen personally throughout my teaching career is that I've seen students use bullet points or numbers. So you need to stick to academic writing task 1. You need to write an introduction, overview, and body paragraphs. Okay, moving on to the next slides. So we'll talk about key feature versus detail. I think this is where most candidates make mistakes. So as you can see here, it says there may be no data to support the description. So this is the problem with key feature versus detail argument. So key feature is basically this. If you've been given a graph chart, so you can see key features, okay, this is the key feature. The number of students taking IELTS in Uzbekistan increased. And the detail of this key feature is growing from 20,000 to 50,000 a year. So you have the description, which is your key feature, right? This is the description. but there may be no data to support the description. And this is your data. Your detail is basically your data. You need to make sure you include data to support the description if you want to get higher than a band 5. So the ideal sentence here would be the number of students taking IELTS in Uzbekistan increased, growing from 20,000 to 50,000. We have the description, which is this, and we have the data, which is growing from 20,000 to 50,000 a year. So yeah, this is basically what you need to do. I hope you understand. We're moving to the next slide. And another problem, there may be a tendency to focus on details without referring to the big picture. The inclusion, which means you're including irrelevant, inappropriate, or inaccurate material or details. So let's look at what this means. Basically, this is saying that you are listing data, you're adding comments, and you are too detail focused. Okay? Listing data, it basically means if you've been given several key features and several numbers, you're just listing them one by one. Okay? You're being too detail focused. So I'll give you an example. Let's say A and B, they increased 3 times. So it used to be 15 and now it's 45. If that was the case, you need to write A and B both trebled to 45. I forgot to include 2 here. A and B both trebled to 45. So a detailed focus candidate would say something like A and B increased from 15 to 16. It's true, there might have been something like this. So A and B might have been, increased from 15 to 16, but this is not really, appropriate. You shouldn't be doing that because you're just listing data. What will you say next? Will you say A and B increased from 17 to 18 and then from 20 to 21? So you just need to make sure that you're being selective, okay? You need to pick and choose your data, okay? Am I making sense? And adding comments. Adding comments is also very common among candidates. So again, we're coming back to the Uzbekistan example. So if you say something like there was an unprecedented increase in the number of students taking IELTS in Uzbekistan, while this sentence is true, the part that's highlighted in red is completely irrelevant. If you say that's because IELTS is the easiest test, it's irrelevant. You're adding your own opinion, okay? You shouldn't be doing that. You just need to select key features and then you need to back it up with data, okay? But you should never include irrelevant details, or your score, at least for task achievement, will plummet. And task achievement is the main problem on candidates. It's usually because of task achievement many students are getting low scores. So make sure you stick to the task. Next slide. And now we'll talk about Band 5 task achievement. Band 6 task achievement. At Band 6, things are getting better. At Band 6, your response focuses on the requirements of the task. You're writing 150 words here. And your format is appropriate. No bullet points, no numbers. You have an introduction, overview, and body paragraphs. And here it says, key features which are selected are covered and adequately highlighted. So let's talk about the word adequately here. Adequately means it's good, but it could be better. So here are your positives. You have appropriate format, adequate coverage of key features, and relevant overview. But still, here it says a relevant overview is attempted, meaning you're trying to write a relevant overview, but you're not really there, okay? Your overview is relevant, but it's not really there. So let's look at some examples here. Relevant overview attempted. So this is basically, examples of Band 6 overviews. So for number-related charts, if you say something like overall, X was the highest and Y was the lowest. If you just focus on what was the highest and what was the lowest, then it's a band 6, okay? And for processes, if you say there are 9 steps starting with X and ending with Y, and it's just one sentence, then it's not really an overview. You're trying to write an overview. You're attempting to write an overview, but that's not really how overview is written. So we'll look at how overview should be written in the next slide. So what is an overview? Overview is basically, a general information. It's sort of a conclusion, okay? So you can, generally summarize the data in your overview. You can talk about general trends in your overview, and it should be 2 or 3 sentences long. But the first sentence should be very general. You should write something that's true for every categories. And your overviews should provide a segue into your body paragraphs. So your examiner, by looking at your overview, should be able to know what you will talk about in your body paragraphs. So ideally, you need to make sure that your overview provides a segue, okay, a path to your body paragraphs. Next slide. Problems with Band 6 task achievement candidates. So some details may be missing or, excessive. You might not include some key features. Further extension or illustration may be needed. So again, common problems, listing data, which means excessive detail. We talked about listing data when looking at Band 5 task achievement. So you're just listing data. You're including very tiny little, details like A and B, as we've talked about it, increased from 15 to 16, 17 to 18, 19, to 20. So you should avoid that. Just be more specific and selective. Further extension, we'll talk about further extension. I guess this was the example of further extension. So let's say A treble to 45, and this is the further extension, reaching its all-time high. You're adding a comment, okay, and you're specifying, so to speak, what happened after treble to 45. B plummeted to 3, which was the lowest figure in the graph. So this is basically an example of further extension. Okay. Band 7 task achievement. At Band 7, so your response covers the requirements of the task. Again, you're writing 150 words, you're summarizing information. Okay, the content is relevant and accurate, so you're not adding any comments. You're not saying the number of IELTS candidates increased because IELTS is the easiest test. You're not saying that, okay? You're just reporting key features. That's what you're doing. No comments, accurate content, meaningful comparisons. You're comparing different categories, and you're writing a clear overview. We talked about it. We talked about what clear overview is. So, yeah, the next slide. I hope you are getting everything. So, appropriately categorized. So appropriately categorized, I guess, yeah. The data, right, are appropriately categorized. You're appropriately categorizing your data. So it's usually referring to your, body paragraphs. You're appropriately categorizing your data in your body paragraphs. So let's look at some examples here. So you need to be familiar with the term umbrella terms. So umbrella terms refers to the commonality shared by some categories. So, and here are some examples. Let's say you're given a chart or a graph about football and basketball. You can, what's the words? You can talk about football and basketball in one paragraph. You can plumb, that's the word I was looking for. You can plumb them together by saying ball sports, okay? If you're given China and Japan, you can say Asian countries. Turkey and Germany, you can say European countries. So this is basically what appropriately categorizing your data refers to. You're selecting your data appropriately. This is what it basically means. And the next slide. So now we're moving to CC, cohesion and coherence. So what keeps you stuck at band 5 CC? Organization is evident, but it's not wholly logical. You're not using logic. There is no logic. Okay? I can see what you're trying to do, but there is no logic. There may be a lack of overall progression. We'll talk about it in the next slides, but to keep it simple, so if you write all the categories in one paragraph, then your organization is evident. Okay, I can see what you're doing. You're writing all the categories in one paragraph, but it's not logical. So looking at your organization, I can't see the logic basically. So that's why you need to make sure that you follow a certain logic. Like this one, you need to follow a logic. So this is very logical. If you talk about 2 Asian countries in one paragraph, it's very logical. I can see what you're doing. You are talking about Asian countries in one paragraph. So this is what you need to do. And the usage of cohesive devices. So this is, again, a common problem among many candidates. So there may be limited or overuse of cohesive devices. So what you often see with many candidates is that they use cohesive devices to make sentences. Okay, they use one cohesive device and then they construct their sentence, and then another cohesive device, and then they construct a sentence. And even at the end, they use another cohesive device to make sentences. This is very problematic, and this is what mechanical means. It's repetitive. For you to write your sentence, you need to, use cohesive devices. That's absolutely wrong. Don't do it with task 2 essays either. So if you say something like, on the one hand, something happened, and then firstly, blah, 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 for example, blah, 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 secondly, blah, 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 then it's very problematic. It's band 6, okay? So make sure to use cohesive devices where they should be used. Next slide. Reference and substitution. So there are problems with reference and substitution at band 6. So reference means basically pronouns. So you're making mistakes when using pronouns, okay? And substitution, it means replacement. So there are certain words and phrases that we can use to avoid repetition, okay? Substitution means replacement. So here it says, the writing may be repetitive due to inadequate or inaccurate use of reference and substitution. Okay, let's look at reference here. Pronouns, this number, this figure, it, etc. So you're making mistakes while using this number or this figure. So basically, a common mistake would be, let's say I said, I have an apple and I like them. If I say, I like them, you can't really understand what I'm referring to. It's a reference problem here. I should have said, I like it, right? I have an apple and I like it. So this is an example of a reference problem, although it's very simple. Substitution, aka replacement. So here are the examples of replacement. The former, the latter, both, neither, or either. Okay, you need to make sure that you use them correctly. So the former, right, it refers to the first one, and the latter refers to the second one. You need to make sure that you can use them correctly, okay? As long as you're doing that, you're getting higher than a band 6. Pronoun ambiguity. Pronoun ambiguity is basically pronoun problems. Ambiguous, it means unclear. Ambiguity means something that's unclear. Okay, so next slide. What keeps you stuck at band 6 CC? Again, information and ideas are generally arranged coherently. Cohesion within and or between sentences may be faulty or mechanical. Again, we talked about it. Cohesion, right? Using cohesive devices on repeat just using one cohesive device, making a sentence, another cohesive device, and then another sentence. So yeah, that's what you need to do. Correctly use reference and substitution. Use pronouns correctly. Use former, the latter correctly. Yeah, that's basically what you need to do to avoid band 6. Information and ideas are logically organized. So I guess this is the positive feature. Substitution is used flexibly with some inaccuracies or some overuse or underuse. So you're either overusing or underusing them. Okay. Okay, now I think we're moving to lexical resource. So what keeps you stuck at band 5 lexical resource? Lexical resource is a fancy way of saying vocabulary. So your resource is limited, but minimally, adequate for the task. Minimally here is being used as a positive, which is really funny and paradoxical, I would say. So your resource is very limited. Use very simple vocabulary, and some of it may be used accurately and some of it maybe not. And your range, doesn't permit much variation in expression. You can't really, use different different words, right? You can't really use varied vocabulary. We'll look at certain examples in the next slide, hopefully. So yeah, what this basically means is illustrated in the next slide. Lexical resource at band 5. Pre-intermediate language, repetitive, I'm sorry for the spelling mistake here, and incorrect use of vocabulary. So here is an example of incorrect use of vocabulary. So it's often common in maps. So if you say X feature became Y, it's completely incorrect. I'll give you an example. So let's say this is your house, this is your house, and you're saying the house became a tall building, which is this. Your house can never become a tall building, What can happen is your house might be replaced by tall building. Never say X feature became Y, You need to make sure you use the correct language, which is replace here. So your house was replaced by tall building. So this is what you need to say. And word formation problems are common as well. So if you say something like there was a significantly increase in oil prices, then you're obviously making a mistake in word formation. So you should have said there was a significant increase in oil prices here. So these are very common problems at band 5 lexical resource. If you avoid these problems, then you're good. You're not getting a band 5 for lexical resource, hopefully. And now band 6, what keeps you stuck at band 6 lexical resource? If the writer is a risk taker, so risk taker is a newly coined term here. I'll explain it in the next slide. And there will be a wider range of vocabulary. You're using wider range of vocabulary, but higher degrees of inaccuracy and inappropriacy. You're trying to use wider range, more complex vocabulary, but it's inappropriate. So a risk taker is basically a person who uses advanced words just for the sake of it, although they don't really understand when and how they should be used. So this is a risk taker. You're taking risks with your vocabulary, with your language. So you shouldn't be a risk taker. You need to be using the words you're only sure about. And there are some errors in spelling and or word formation. Word formation, we talked about it using, let's say, adverbs with nouns. But they do not impede communication. Impede means so it doesn't prevent the reader from understanding what you're saying. So if you say something like there was a significant increase, I can still understand that you wanted to say there was a significant decrease. It's not impeding communication. So band 6 lexical resource, again, you're a risk taker. Use words you're not really sure about. One example is oscillate. Oscillate is an advanced word, but it's not really used in task 1, so just don't use it. Don't even look it up. Swing between two extremes is a nice expression. So if something swings between two extremes, I think it's pretty much self-explanatory. So I can't really come up with specific examples to explain the expression, but if something swings between two extremes, it's swinging between two extremes. It's really difficult for me to explain what this expression means, but there are certain cases when it could be used, but unless you're sure about using it, don't use it. And some mistakes in word formation we talked about it. So as you can see, even at Band 6 lexical resource, there are problems, there are mistakes in word formation. And now let's talk about Band 7 lexical resource. So your resource is sufficient, right? It's enough. There is some ability to use less common and or idiomatic items. We'll talk about less common and idiomatic items in the next slide. An awareness of style and collocation, we'll talk about collocation as well. So even at Band 7, although these are positive comments, there are some negatives. Look at them. So there are only a few errors in spelling. Few means it's usually 4 or 5, okay? If we were to quantify it, it's usually 4 or 5 in spelling and or word formation. Okay, next slide. So if you're Band 7 lexical resource, then you're flexible with your vocabulary. You can use precise language. You can use less common idiomatic items. Back the trend, for example. Back the trend basically means, let's say you're given 5 categories and there is an downward trend for 4 categories, but one category, it keeps increasing despite the fact that other 4 categories are decreasing. Then one category is backing the trend. Hold steady is my favorite less common or idiomatic item. I think it just falls into the category of less common items. It's not really idiomatic, but back the trend is idiomatic. Hold steady means to not increase or decrease. So it's, let's say, something increased to 45 and it's staying at 45. It's holding steady. Collocations, pronounced difference, okay? Pronounced difference means obvious difference, clear difference, pronounced difference. So this is an example of collocation. I think there were some problems. So though inappropriacies occur, so you can use collocations, but there are some inappropriacies, and this is an example of inappropriacy. So when you try to use a more advanced version of a simple word, which is difference, you might use the word discrepancy. It's the synonym of the word difference. But the problem is when you use the word discrepancy, you might need to change the word that's being collocated with it as well. I'm not sure if the word pronounced can be used with the word discrepancy. I've never seen it. I just checked it in my dictionary. I think it can't be used. The word pronounced can't be used with the word discrepancy. So when you're trying to use a more advanced version of a simple word, you might make a mistake, okay? So this is called an inappropriacy. Even at Band 7, there are certain inappropriacies. So you need to make sure that you're using collocations, idiomatic items correctly all the time if you want to score Band 8 and Band 9. Okay, word formation. Let's talk about word formation. Okay, I have some exercises here. So we're finished with the criteria. So here are some exercises and here's some additional information for you to work on. Word formation. This is basically word formation, changing parts of speech to others. It's almost like paraphrasing. So let's say gas price increased a year ago. You can change the words, right? You can change the format of the words, and you can say something like gas prices saw an increase a year ago. So you're taking a verb, turning it into a noun, increase, right? And you're using a verb with a noun, okay? So verb noun collocation. Instead of saying gas price increased a year ago, you're saying gas prices saw an increase a year ago. My salary declined last month. There was a decline in my salary. Hope you understand this. And this is very simplistic, I know. We'll look at more advanced examples in the next slides. So increase verbs, decrease verbs. You need to learn this and you need to make sure that you use them correctly. They're not really synonymous with each other, but they are generally increased verbs. So for you to write that something increased, you can use these verbs. So rise, grow, soar, which means to increase significantly. I think you can say significantly. If there is a significant increase, then you can say that something soared. And soar can be used as a noun as well. Climb, reach, okay? Let's say a number climbed to 55 or reached 55. Climb to, reach without prepositions. Shoot up, skyrockets, okay? Skyrocket, use skyrockets when there is exponential increase, let's say from 3 to 20. That's an exponential increase. You can say it skyrocketed from 3 to 20, or from 20, right, to 90. It's skyrocketed. You can use the verb rocket as well. You can say it rocketed. Shoot up has the same meaning. Double, treble. Treble means triple, okay? It's the same as triple. And you know what the word double means. It means to increase twofold. And decrease verbs. Decrease verbs are the following: decline, drop, fall. They can be used interchangeably. Go down, again, this is another synonym. Plunge, plummet. You only use these with dramatic decreases, okay? Dramatic decreases. Let's say something decreased from from 90 to 50. It's, it's a plunge. Plunge can be used as a noun as well. Plummets, it can't be used as a noun. It plummeted from 90 to 50. Half means to decrease twofold. So double, half. They're antonyms, okay? They're completely antithetical to each other. Dip. This is another verb that means fall, okay? I think dip, it means to fall slightly, marginal decrease. So next one, verb plus adjectives, okay, significantly increased. So it doesn't matter if you use adverbs first and then verbs second. It doesn't really matter if you say increase significantly, significantly increase. It doesn't really matter. So adjective plus noun collocations, significant increase, significant decrease. You need to make sure to use them. And important adjectives for task 1, exponential increase, okay, marked increase, obvious increase, marginal increase, which is small increase, negligible increase, and steady increase. It increases steadily. Let's say in 10 years, it's increasing by 20 each year. It's a steady increase. Okay, next one. Grammar range and accuracy, grammatical range and accuracy. So here are some examples of how to score a band 7 and above for grammatical range and accuracy. So make sure you use simple sentences. Okay, simple sentences are the sentences that include subject, verb, and an object. I play football. This is a simple sentence. Compound sentences, they include fanboys, which is for, and, nor, or, yet. So fanboys, okay? Make sure to remember this acronym. Complex sentences, they include subordinates, although, if, because, and relative clause. So I'm sure I include some examples here. So yeah, grammatical range. Again, we're talking about grammatical range in the slides. And here are some examples of fanboys. I'm using neither, right? Or neither, if you're British like me. Neither gender showed high passing rates. So this is from my own essay. Neither. I'm using fanboys. or compound sentences. The figure for the latter increased by 70%, while that for the former, look at the usage of that here. That means figure. The figure for the latter increased by 70, while that, this is an example of substitution. I'm replacing the word figure with that, or reference. It could be reference or substitution, I don't know. But this is the correct usage of either substitution or reference. The figure for the latter increased by 70%, while that means the figure for the former by mere 2. The percentage of females that passed their driving test. Again, I'm using relative clause, which is a complex sentence. The past had decreased marginally. Do you remember the adjective, right? Marginal, small, marginally, which was still higher than that of than that of males. I'm sorry. So that again here refers to the percentage. I'm not repeating the word percentage, right? I'm using that to replace the word percentage. So this is something you can learn. Okay. To get a band 7 for grammar, make sure you incorporate a mix of complex, compound, and simple sentences. Maintain a 50% accuracy, which means if you write 10 sentences, make sure that 5 of your sentences are grammatically correct. Even if you have a problem with comma or a dot, it's still a mistake. So your sentences, at least 5 of them, should be error-free, completely error-free. And avoid, again, punctuation errors. So don't write comma after although. And again, if you're making errors, make sure that they're non-systematic. Basically, non-systematic means you're not repeating the same mistake over and over again. It's not a mistake, it's a slip. If your error is non-systematic, then it's not an error, it's a slip. Let's say you missed an article, but then after, the sentence, you used the article correctly. It's a non-systematic error. You made one mistake, one small mistake. It was either typo or a slip, but then you didn't repeat that mistake. It's a non-systematic error. The problem with low-level candidates is that they often make systematic errors. They repeat their mistakes over and over again. So make sure you don't do that. And for homework, please check the comments section. Thank you. That was it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Thanks. Take care.